Rain hammered against the windows of River's Edge Diner like bullets on a tin roof. The neon sign outside flickered erratically, casting an unsteady red glow across the cracked parking lot, where puddles grew into small lakes. Inside, the warmth of the diner stood in stark contrast to the storm raging outside. Jessica Parker wiped down the counter with practiced efficiency, her movements automatic after years of the same routine. At 25, her eyes carried a weariness that belonged to someone much older. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her blue uniform had seen better days, but there was an unmistakable quiet dignity in how she carried herself. The late-night crowd was sparse. An elderly couple shared a slice of pie in the corner booth. A truck driver nursed his third cup of coffee while thumbing through yesterday's newspaper. A mother with a sleeping child waited for the rain to ease, gently stroking her daughter's hair. These were the forgotten hours when the world seemed to hold its breath between yesterday and tomorrow. The relative peace shattered when the door burst open. Three men swaggered in, bringing with them the smell of expensive cologne mixed with whiskey and cigarettes. Their clothes were too fine for this side of town, designer labels visible even at a distance. The leader, a man in his early 30s with slicked back hair and cold eyes, surveyed the diner like he was appraising merchandise. His gaze landed on Jessica, a predatory smile spreading across his face. A Rolex glinted on his wrist as he raised his hand, snapping his fingers loudly to get her attention. This was a man accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Hey, sweetheart," he called out, his voice cutting through the quiet murmur of the diner. "Serve us, bitch. We've been waiting all night to see that pretty face." The elderly couple exchanged nervous glances. The truck driver suddenly found his coffee fascinating. The mother pulled her child closer, turning away slightly. No one wanted trouble. Jessica took a deep breath, her knuckles whitening around the coffee pot she held. Her mother's face flashed in her mind, pale and fragile, against hospital sheets dependent on medication that cost more than Jessica made in a month. That vision, as it always did, steeled her resolve. "What can I get for you, gentlemen?" she asked, her voice steady but tight. The man leaned across the counter, invading her space. A subtle movement of his wrist brought the Rolex into better view, an antique model with a distinctive military insignia on its face. For a moment, Jessica froze, recognition flickering across her features. "Jason Sterling." He introduced himself, though he hadn't been asked. "These are my associates, Vince and Derek." The two men behind him, both broad-shouldered, with expressions that suggested thinking wasn't their primary skill, nodded curtly. "We'll take 3 coffees for now," Jason said, his tone making it clear that coffee was the least of what he expected. "And your undivided attention." As Jessica turned to fetch the coffee cups, Jason reached across the counter and grabbed her wrist. The coffee pot slipped from her grasp, hot liquid splashing across her hand. She bit back a cry of pain. "I didn't say you could walk away," Jason said, tightening his grip. The truck driver half rose from his seat, then sank back down when Vince shot him a warning look. The mother gathered her child and hurried to the bathroom, seeking sanctuary from the brewing confrontation. "My hand," Jessica said quietly. "You're burning my hand." Jason glanced down at the coffee pooling on the counter, soaking into Jessica's skin, which was already turning an angry red. He smiled and released her, not out of mercy, but as if the injury bored him now that it was accomplished. "Clumsy girl," he said, wiping his own hand on a napkin. "You should be more careful." Jessica stepped back, cradling her burned hand. The pain was intense, but it was nothing compared to the humiliation burning in her chest. She'd endured plenty of difficult customers in her years of service work, but there was something different about these men. There was calculation in their cruelty. As she turned to get ice for her hand, a folded paper fell from Jason's pocket onto the counter. Jessica glimpsed official letterhead and the words, "Fort Benning Medical Division." Before Jason snatched it back, his expression suddenly tense. "See something interesting?" he asked, voice dropping dangerously low. "No, sir," Jessica replied automatically, though her mind was racing. Fort Benning was where her father had been stationed before his death 7 years ago. The medical division was where he'd worked as a field medic specialist. Before Jason could press further, the diner door swung open again. This time it opened with deliberate slowness, a controlled movement that somehow commanded more attention than the earlier dramatic entrance. 4 men entered, rain dripping from their leather jackets. They wore no colors or patches, but their formation and bearing marked them instantly as a unit. They moved with the synchronized awareness of men accustomed to watching each other's backs. Leading them was a man who appeared to be in his late 50s, though his posture and movement suggested the fitness of someone much younger. His face bore a long scar that ran from his right temple down to his jawline, and his salt and pepper hair was cut in a style that, while longer than military regulations, still hinted at decades of crew cuts. His eyes, a penetrating steel blue, scanned the room with practiced efficiency, taking in every detail, every potential threat, every exit. Those eyes locked briefly with Jessica's, and something passed between them, a momentary connection she couldn't explain. Then his gaze shifted to Jason Sterling and his companions, and his expression hardened almost imperceptibly. The four men settled into a booth with a clear line of sight to both the counter and the door. Their leader sat facing Jason directly. The message was clear: they were watching. Jason noticed too. His hand closed around his coffee cup a little tighter, and a muscle in his jaw twitched. "Friends of yours?" he asked Jessica, his tone suggesting she should answer carefully. "No," Jessica replied truthfully. "Never seen them before." One of the newcomers, a younger man with a neatly trimmed beard, approached the counter. "Coffee for the table, please," he said politely, placing a $20 bill on the counter. "Keep the change." As Jessica prepared the coffee, Jason's hand shot out again, grabbing her injured wrist deliberately. She couldn't suppress a gasp of pain this time. "I wasn't done talking to you," Jason said, voice laced with artificial sweetness. A chair scraped against the linoleum floor. The scarred man stood up, his movement unhurried but purposeful. He approached the counter, stopping precisely 6 feet from Jason. "You might want to let go of the lady," he said. His voice was calm, almost gentle, but carried an unmistakable weight of authority. Jason turned a practiced sneer on his face. "Mind your own business, old man." The scarred man didn't react to the insult. He simply maintained his position, hands relaxed at his sides, but Jessica noticed how balanced his stance was, ready to move in any direction instantly. "The lady is working," the man said, each word measured and precise. "You're hurting her. That makes it my business." The diner had gone completely silent. Even the rain seemed to pause. Jason released Jessica's wrist, turning fully to face the older man. "Do you know who I am?" "Someone who wasn't raised right," the man replied without hesitation. Vince and Derek stepped forward, flanking Jason. The three other men from the booth stood as well, spreading out slightly, creating space for maneuvering. The scarred man remained perfectly still. "Walk away," he said, his voice dropping slightly. "This doesn't need to escalate." Jessica held her breath. There was something happening beneath the surface here, currents of tension and recognition that went beyond a simple confrontation between strangers. Jason's hand moved toward his jacket, but before he could reach whatever he was going for, the scarred man spoke again. "That's a nice watch," he said, nodding toward the Rolex. "Military issue, special forces, not standard equipment, certainly not something you earned." Jason's face paled slightly. His hand froze midway to his jacket. "3 against 4, the scarred man continued conversationally. "Not good odds, especially when the four have seen things that would give you nightmares." The tension stretched to breaking point. Then Jason forced a laugh. "Whatever, Grandpa. We were just leaving anyway." He turned to Jessica, leaning close enough that only she could hear his next words. "This isn't over. When I'm done with you, you'll be begging for a job scrubbing toilets." The three men backed toward the door, maintaining eye contact with the scarred man and his companions. Jason paused at the threshold. "You better watch your back, old-timer. You have no idea who you're messing with." The door slammed behind them, and the diner collectively exhaled. The scarred man turned to Jessica. "You okay, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice noticeably gentler. Jessica nodded, though tears threatened at the corners of her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "You didn't have to do that." The man shook his head. "Everyone has to stand up to bullies. Otherwise they win." He glanced down at her burned hand, which was now an angry red. Without asking permission, he gently took her wrist, examining the injury with practiced eyes. "Second-degree burn," he said. "Got a first aid kit." Jessica nodded toward the back. "Under the register." The man retrieved it efficiently, then guided Jessica to a stool. His movements were precise as he cleaned the burn with antiseptic wipes. From his pocket, he produced a small tube of ointment with military markings. "This works better than anything you can buy over the counter," he explained, applying it carefully to her skin. The relief was almost immediate, a cooling sensation replacing the burning pain. He finished by wrapping a light gauze bandage around her hand, with the skill of someone who had dressed countless wounds. "Thank you, Mr. Donovan," he supplied. "Maxwell Donovan. Everyone calls me Max." "Jessica Parker," she replied. Something flickered in Max's eyes at her last name so brief she almost missed it. He cleared his throat. "Those men, they're trouble. Real trouble. You know them." Jessica shook her head. "Never saw them before tonight. But that watch he was wearing." She hesitated, unsure if she should continue. Max waited patiently. "It looked exactly like my father's watch. He was military too. Special Forces medic. He died 7 years ago." Max's companions exchanged glances. The youngest one, who couldn't be more than 35, whispered something to the others. "Rough life, huh?" Max asked, his tone suggesting he already knew more than he was letting on. Jessica gave a small, tired smile. "Everyone's got their burdens." "Some more than others," Max replied. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a business card, sliding it across the counter to her. "Liberty Riders," it read with an eagle emblem and a phone number. "No address. If those men come back, or if you need anything, you call that number," Max said. "Anytime, day or night." Jessica studied the card. "You're a motorcycle club." Max's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Among other things, we look out for our own." "I'm not one of yours," Jessica pointed out. "You sure about that?" Max asked cryptically. Before Jessica could question him further, he nodded to his companions. They left money on their table and headed for the door. Max paused before following them. "That watch," he said quietly. "What was your father's name?" "Thomas," Jessica replied. "Thomas Parker." Max's expression shifted, a complex mix of emotions crossing his scarred face. "Thomas Parker," he repeated as if testing the name. "Good man, the best," Jessica said, feeling the familiar ache of loss. "He taught me everything important. Honor, duty, standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves." Max nodded slowly. "Sounds like someone worth remembering." He turned to leave, then stopped. "Jessica, those men who were in here, they're connected to Sterling Enterprises." "Heard of it?" Jessica frowned. "The pharmaceutical company. They make my mother's MS medication." "That's them," Max confirmed, his voice hardening slightly. "They're not just selling drugs. They're selling suffering at a premium price." Before Jessica could ask what he meant, Max was gone, disappearing into the rain with his companions. Through the window, she saw them mount motorcycles, powerful machines that rumbled to life with a collective roar before vanishing into the storm-lashed night. The diner felt strangely empty in their absence. Jessica touched the bandage on her hand, still cool and soothing from the military ointment. Her gaze fell on the Liberty Riders card, and a peculiar sense of destiny settled over her, as if her life had just taken a turn down an unexpected road. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having washed the world clean. Jessica woke early despite having closed the diner past midnight. Her small apartment was barely large enough for 2 people, but it was clean and neat, everything in its place. Her mother, Eleanor, was still asleep in the hospital bed they'd set up in what should have been the living room. The multiple sclerosis had progressed rapidly over the past year, leaving Eleanor dependent on Jessica for almost everything. The medication that kept her condition stable cost nearly $5,000 per month, even with insurance. Jessica checked the IV line, adjusting it with the practiced ease of someone who had learned medical skills out of necessity rather than training. She had been halfway through nursing school when her father died and her mother's condition worsened. Dreams had to be put aside when reality came calling. She opened the small medicine cabinet in the bathroom, counting the remaining pills in her mother's prescription bottle. 3 days' worth. The refill would cost $1 and $200, money she didn't have until payday next week. Somehow she'd have to make it stretch. On the bathroom counter sat a worn notebook filled with medical notes in Jessica's neat handwriting. She'd continued studying on her own, unable to completely abandon her dream of medicine. Whenever she had a spare moment, she read textbooks borrowed from the library or watched online lectures on her phone. Eleanor stirred as Jessica prepared her morning medication. "You're up early," she murmured, her voice thin but warm. "Big day," Jessica replied with forced cheerfulness. "Howard's letting me work a double shift." Eleanor's eyes, so like Jessica's own, filled with concern. "You're working too hard." Jessica shook her head. "I'm fine. Besides, I like being busy." She helped her mother sit up, arranging pillows behind her back for support. As she did so, her sleeve pulled back, revealing the bandage on her hand. "What happened?" Eleanor asked immediately. "Just a little burn from the coffee pot," Jessica said, downplaying the incident. Her mother worried enough already. Eleanor wasn't fooled. "Jessica Ann Parker, don't you lie to your mother." With a sigh, Jessica related the events of the previous night, omitting the more frightening details. She mentioned the rude customers and how a group of men had intervened but left out the threats in the strange connection to her father's watch. "They called themselves the Liberty Riders," Jessica concluded. Eleanor went very still. "Liberty Riders?" she repeated. "Did you get their names?" "Just one. Their leader, Maxwell Donovan." Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, there was an odd expression on her face. "Your father knew a Max Donovan. They served together." Jessica sat down on the edge of the bed, her full attention captured. Her mother rarely spoke about her father's military service. "He never mentioned him to me." "There were many things your father couldn't talk about," Eleanor said carefully. "His work was classified. But I met Max once at a unit gathering. He and your father were close." Jessica thought about the strange recognition in Max's eyes when she'd given her name the way he'd asked about her father. Why wouldn't he have said something? Eleanor reached for Jessica's hand, squeezing it gently. "The military changes men, sweetheart, and not always for the better. Maybe he has his reasons." The conversation was interrupted by Eleanor's sudden coughing fit. Jessica quickly fetched water and another pill, helping her mother take it. "Get some rest," Jessica urged. "I'll be back after my shift." On her way out, Jessica paused by the small table that served as their shrine to Thomas Parker. His military portrait medals and folded flag occupied the place of honor. Next to them stood a much more casual photo showing a younger Thomas in desert camo arm slung around another soldier's shoulders. They were both laughing at something off camera. Jessica had looked at that photo hundreds of times, but now she studied it more carefully. The other soldier's face was partially obscured by shadow, but there was something familiar about his profile. She couldn't be certain, but it might have been a younger, unscarred version of Maxwell Donovan. River's Edge Diner was quiet when Jessica arrived for her shift. Howard Brooks, the owner, was behind the counter going over accounts with a furrowed brow. At 58, Howard was a gruff but fair employer, a former Marine who had opened the diner after his service. He looked up when Jessica entered, his expression brightening slightly. "There she is, my most reliable waitress," he said by way of greeting. "How's Eleanor today?" "Holding steady," Jessica replied, tying her apron. "Howard, do you know anything about a motorcycle group called the Liberty Riders?" Howard's hand stilled on the accounting ledger. "Where'd you hear that name?" Jessica explained the previous night's incident, including the confrontation with Jason Sterling and his companions. As she spoke, Howard's expression darkened. "Sterling," he spat the name like a curse. "Richard Sterling's son, Onson." "I think so," Jessica said. "He mentioned Sterling Enterprises." Howard slammed the ledger shut. "That explains it then. Richard's been trying to buy this place for months. Wants the whole block for some new development. When I wouldn't sell, he started playing dirty. Health inspections, tax audits, you name it." Jessica felt a chill. "So Jason was here to intimidate you?" "And anyone connected to me," Howard confirmed grimly. "But he picked the wrong diner to mess with." He looked at Jessica's bandaged hand. "You okay, kid? Really okay?" "I'm fine," Jessica assured him. "But what about these Liberty Riders? You know them." Howard hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "They're good people. Veterans mostly. They help their own." "That's what Donovan said, that they look out for their own, but I'm not a veteran." "Your father was," Howard pointed out. "Thomas Parker was a damn fine medic. Saved a lot of lives." Jessica studied Howard with new interest. "You knew my father." "We never served together directly, but our paths crossed." Howard looked away suddenly, very interested in wiping down the already clean counter. "The military community is smaller than you'd think." Jessica wanted to press further, but the breakfast rush began, and the diner filled with customers. The morning passed in a blur of coffee, refills, and breakfast orders. By mid-afternoon, the crowd had thinned to just a few regulars. Jessica was restocking napkins when the door opened, and her heart skipped a beat. Jason Sterling walked in alone this time, wearing an expensive suit that looked out of place in the humble diner. His Rolex gleamed on his wrist, catching the light deliberately as he approached the counter. "Just coffee," he said, sliding onto a stool. His tone was pleasant, which somehow made him more menacing than the previous night's aggression. Jessica poured his coffee silently, keeping her distance. Howard emerged from the kitchen, positioning himself strategically behind the counter. "Mr. Sterling," Howard acknowledged coolly, "what brings you back to my establishment?" Jason smiled a practiced expression that never reached his eyes. "Just checking in on our favorite waitress." He turned to Jessica. "How's the hand?" "Fine," Jessica replied shortly. Jason sipped his coffee. "You know, I was thinking about our conversation last night, about that watch you seemed so interested in." Jessica said nothing. "It was my father's," Jason continued, "given to him by a grateful soldier whose life he saved. At least that's the story he tells." He twisted the watch around his wrist. "Personally, I think he took it off some poor bastard who didn't make it home." Howard's hands clenched into fists behind the counter, but his voice remained level. "I think you should finish your coffee and leave Mr. Sterling." Jason ignored him, focusing entirely on Jessica. "My father sent me to deliver a message. He says to tell you that your mother's medication might be experiencing some supply issues in the near future. Unless, of course, you convince your boss here to reconsider his position on selling." Jessica felt her blood run cold. "You can't do that." "We already have," Jason replied smoothly. "Sterling Enterprises owns the pharmaceutical company that manufactures your mother's medication. We can restrict distribution to certain pharmacies. Nothing illegal about it. Just business." Howard stepped forward. "Get out of my diner, now." Jason stood unhurriedly, dropping $100 bill on the counter. "For the coffee," he said. "Keep the change. You'll need it." At the door, he paused. "One last thing. Your new friends, the Liberty Riders, I'd stay away from them if I were you. They have a habit of getting involved in things that don't concern them, and people close to them tend to have unfortunate accidents." His gaze flickered to a framed photo of Thomas Parker on the diner wall. Like father, like daughter, perhaps. The threat hung in the air long after he departed. Howard came around the counter, putting a steadying hand on Jessica's shoulder. "You okay?" Jessica nodded stiffly, though her mind was racing. The implied connection between her father's death and the Liberty Riders couldn't be coincidence. "Howard," she said slowly, "how did my father really die?" Howard looked pained. "Jessica, that's not my story to tell. They said it was a car accident." Jessica persisted. "Single vehicle, late at night, bad weather. But my father was the most careful driver I knew. He never took risks, especially not with his life." Howard sighed heavily. "There were questions. The investigation was quick, maybe too quick, but nobody could prove anything. And now Sterling is threatening my mother's medication." Jessica said, connecting dots that had been hovering just beyond her perception. "This isn't just about the diner, is it? This is something bigger." Before Howard could respond, the diner door opened again. Jessica tensed, expecting Jason's return, but it was Max Donovan who entered. He was alone this time and somehow seemed even more imposing without his companions. His eyes went immediately to Jessica, assessing. "You've had another visitor," he stated rather than asked. "Jason Sterling," Jessica confirmed. "How did you know?" "His car just passed me on the highway," Max replied, driving like he had something to prove. He turned to Howard, extending his hand. "Max Donovan, you must be Howard Brooks." Howard clasped his hand firmly. "Been a long time, Max." "Too long," Max agreed. He looked between them. "I'm guessing Sterling made threats." Jessica nodded. "My mother's medication." Max's expression hardened. "That's how they operate. Find the pressure point and squeeze." He pulled out a chair, sitting down with the deliberate movements of a man who never acted without purpose. "Jessica, there are things you need to know about your father, about Sterling Enterprises, and about what happened 7 years ago." Jessica felt a chill run down her spine. "My father's accident." "It wasn't an accident," Max said bluntly. "Thomas was murdered because he discovered something he wasn't supposed to know. Something about unauthorized medical experiments on soldiers. Experiments run by Sterling Enterprises with military contracts." The world seemed to tilt beneath Jessica's feet. "How do you know this?" "Because I was there." Max replied, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "I was with Thomas the night he died. We were ambushed on our way to meet a journalist with evidence. The car crash was staged after Thomas was already dead." Jessica sank into a chair, legs suddenly unable to support her. "Why didn't you come forward? Why didn't you tell us? Max's hand unconsciously traced the scar on his face. I tried. I woke up in a military hospital with a traumatic brain injury and fragmentary amnesia. By the time I recovered enough to piece things together, the investigation was closed. Evidence had disappeared and witnesses had been silenced. He looked directly at Jessica. I couldn't even remember your father's full name, just fragments. It wasn't until I saw you last night, heard your name, that it all started coming back. Howard placed a glass of water in front of Jessica. Drink, he instructed gently. Jessica took a shaky sip. The watch Jason was wearing, your father's, Max confirmed, given to him by our unit for saving 12 men during an ambush. Sterling must have taken it as a trophy. A cold determination settled over Jessica. What do we do now? Now, Max said, you come with me to meet the rest of the Liberty Riders. If Sterling is targeting you directly, you're not safe here. And there's something at our headquarters you need to see. My mother, Jessica began. We'll arrange protection for her too, Max assured her. The Liberty Riders take care of their own. And Jessica, he added with solemn certainty, as Thomas Parker's daughter, you've always been one of ours. We just didn't know where to find you until now. As they prepared to leave, Jessica retrieved her backpack from behind the counter. Inside was her medical notebook, a photo of her parents, and a small velvet pouch she always kept with her. She opened it now, removing a tarnished set of dog tags. These were returned with my father's effects, she explained, showing them to Max. I carry them for luck. Max took them gently, running his thumb over the embossed name and service number. His eyes closed briefly, as if in pain. Thomas would be proud of you, he said, handing them back. You have his strength and his eyes. Outside Max's motorcycle waited a powerful machine gleaming in the afternoon sun. He handed Jessica a helmet. Ever ridden before? She shook her head. Hold tight, he instructed, swinging his leg over the bike. And remember, lean with me, not against me. Jessica climbed on behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. The engine roared to life, a deep vibration that seemed to connect directly to her heart. As they pulled away from River's Edge Diner, leaving behind the world she had known for a new and dangerous reality, Jessica couldn't help feeling that somehow impossibly her father was with her. That in finding Max Donovan and the Liberty Riders, she had found a part of Thomas Parker she had thought lost forever. The road stretched before them, leading away from the life she had settled for and toward the truth she had always deserved. Somewhere ahead lay answers, justice, and perhaps even vengeance. But first there would be the storms to weather and battles to fight. Jessica tightened her grip and faced forward, ready for whatever came next. After all, she was Thomas Parker's daughter, and Parker women never backed down from a fight. The Liberty Riders' headquarters occupied an unremarkable brick building on the outskirts of Chicago, its weathered facade deliberately inconspicuous. Only a small eagle emblem beside the door offered any indication of what lay inside. Jessica followed Max through the entrance, uncertain what to expect from a motorcycle club's inner sanctum. What greeted her wasn't the stereotypical biker den portrayed in movies, but a space that radiated purpose and brotherhood. The main hall featured polished wooden floors and exposed brick walls adorned with American flags and military memorabilia spanning several generations of service. A large round table dominated the center of the room, surrounded by comfortable leather chairs. Along one wall, a bar constructed from reclaimed oak gleamed under soft lighting. Welcome to Liberty Hall, Max said, his voice carrying an unmistakable note of pride. This was just an abandoned warehouse when we started. Everything you see we built with our own hands. Several men looked up as they entered, rising respectfully from their seats. Jessica recognized the three riders who had accompanied Max at the diner. They approached with measured steps, their postures betraying years of military discipline despite their civilian clothing. Brothers, Max addressed them, this is Jessica Parker, Thomas Parker's daughter. The atmosphere in the room shifted immediately. Eyes widened in recognition, and the men exchanged significant glances. A stocky man with a neatly trimmed beard stepped forward, offering his hand. Marcus Hamilton, he introduced himself. I served with your father in Afghanistan. 4th deployment. Best field medic I ever knew. Jessica shook his hand, noticing the emotion he struggled to contain. You knew my dad. Most of us did, replied another man taller and leaner than Marcus. Ray Davidson, intelligence specialist. Your father saved my life in Kandahar. The third man, younger than the others with sharp, observant eyes, nodded respectfully. Dominic Reyes, I was fresh out of training when I met your father. He showed me the ropes, taught me things they don't cover in basic field medicine. Jessica felt overwhelmed by these connections to her father she'd never known existed. For 7 years, Thomas Parker had been memorialized only in her own memories and her mother's stories. Now suddenly he lived on in the recollections of these men, his brothers in arms. Please, she said, her voice unsteady, tell me why I'm here. What's really happening with Sterling Enterprises? Max exchanged glances with his companions, then gestured toward a door at the back of the hall. It's better if we show you. He led Jessica through a series of rooms, each serving a different purpose. One contained sophisticated communications equipment, another housed a small but well-equipped medical clinic. The third room, secured with a keypad lock, was their destination. Inside, maps and photographs covered the walls, connected by strings of red and blue yarn. Digital screens displayed financial charts, corporate structures, and personnel files. At the center of it all was a large corkboard dominated by a photograph of Richard Sterling in an expensive suit accepting an award at some corporate function. Operation Phoenix, Max explained, indicating the room with a sweep of his hand. Our investigation into Sterling Enterprises and their illegal medical testing program. Jessica moved closer to the wall, studying the photographs and documents. This has been going on since my father died. And before, Ray confirmed, stepping to a computer and pulling up a series of files. Thomas discovered that Sterling was conducting unauthorized experiments on military personnel using experimental compounds. Drugs designed to enhance physical and cognitive performance under combat conditions. On the screen, photographs appeared showing soldiers hooked to IVs, their expressions vacant. Medical charts displayed vitals and drug dosages far beyond standard protocols. Sterling secured military contracts through bribes and blackmail. Marcus continued. He used his connections to access bases where he could conduct trials without proper oversight. When results were promising, he'd claim the breakthroughs as legitimate research. When soldiers died or suffered permanent damage, the incidents were classified and buried. Jessica's gaze fixed on a particular image, a close-up of a subject's arm bearing a distinctive tattoo. That's Jason Sterling's tattoo. I saw it at the diner. Max nodded grimly. Richard Sterling used his own son as a test subject. Jason was a promising Marine until his father's experiments left him with permanent neurological damage. The aggression, the mood swings, they're side effects of the compounds he was given. And my father discovered all this. Thomas was treating soldiers who showed unusual symptoms, Dominic explained. He started noticing patterns, connections to Sterling's pharmaceutical trials. He compiled evidence, built a case, and was planning to take it to the Justice Department. That's when Sterling had him killed. Max said, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. Made it look like an accident. But we were together that night, heading to meet a contact at the FBI. Our car was forced off the road. Thomas died instantly. I was thrown clear but suffered a traumatic brain injury. By the time I recovered enough to remember what happened, the trail had gone cold. Jessica sank into a nearby chair, the magnitude of the conspiracy overwhelming her. And my mother's medication. How does that fit in? Ray pulled up another set of files. The MS drug your mother takes, Nurasil. It's a commercial version of one of the experimental compounds. Sterling's company holds the patent, controls production and distribution. They price it astronomically because they know patients have no alternatives. The worst part, Max added, crossing to a filing cabinet and withdrawing a thick folder, is that evidence suggests Nurasil doesn't actually help MS patients. It manages symptoms but secretly accelerates the disease progression, creating lifetime customers who need increasingly higher doses. Jessica's mind raced back to her mother's deterioration over the past year, how the doctors had been puzzled by the unusual acceleration of symptoms despite the medication. They're killing her, she whispered, horror giving way to rage. They killed my father and now they're killing my mother. Max laid a hand on her shoulder, his touch steadying. That's why we need your help, Jessica. We've spent years gathering evidence, but we've hit walls at every turn. Sterling's too connected, too protected. But with you, we might finally have a chance to bring him down. Me. What can I do? Dominic moved to a filing cabinet and withdrew a slim metal case. Opening it, Richard revealed a sophisticated recording device and what appeared to be jewelry, a delicate silver pendant on a chain. This pendant contains a miniature camera and audio recorder, he explained. Military grade, virtually undetectable. We need someone on the inside who can get close to Jason Sterling. He's our weak link, the one person who might turn against his father. Jessica stared at the pendant, understanding dawning. You want me to spy on Jason Sterling? We want you to get the evidence we need, Max corrected. Jason visits the diner regularly. He's shown interest in you. If you could get close enough to gain his trust, you might access information we can't. It's dangerous, Marcus warned. If Sterling discovers what you're doing, he won't hesitate to eliminate you just like he did your father. Jessica stood up, pacing the room as she processed everything. The danger was undeniable, but so was the injustice. Her father had died trying to expose the truth. Her mother was dying because of Sterling's greed. How many other families had suffered similar fates? I need time to think, she said finally, and I need to check on my mother. Max nodded. Of course, Ray will drive you home. But Jessica, he added, his expression grave. Sterling already knows you've connected with us. Time isn't on our side. As they prepared to leave, Max retrieved a small box from his desk drawer. Inside was a cell phone, sleek and new. Secure line encrypted, only connects to our numbers. Keep it with you at all times. Jessica slipped it into her pocket, her mind already calculating risks and possibilities. As they walked back through Liberty Hall, she paused at a wall bearing framed photographs of fallen soldiers. Among them was her father, young and proud, in his uniform, smiling with an arm around a younger, unscarred Max. He would be proud of you, Max said quietly, following her gaze. Thomas never backed down from a fight, especially when it mattered. Jessica touched the photograph gently. Neither do I. The apartment was dark when Ray dropped her off, the only light coming from the small lamp beside her mother's hospital bed. Eleanor slept fitfully, her breathing labored despite the oxygen supplement. Jessica checked her vitals, adjusting the blanket with practiced care. She sat beside the bed, watching her mother's face in the dim light. The strong, vibrant woman who had raised her was fading away, victim to both disease and corporate greed. The reality of Sterling's manipulation filled her with a cold fury unlike anything she'd experienced before. Her phone buzzed with a message from Howard. Sterling's son was asking about you. Be careful. She was still contemplating her next move when a soft knock at the door startled her. Hand moving instinctively to the kitchen drawer where she kept a small canister of pepper spray, Jessica approached the door cautiously. Who is it? She called through the wood. Sarah Williams, came the reply. Max sent me. Jessica opened the door to find a woman in her mid-50s with short gray hair and intelligent eyes. She carried a medical bag and wore a no-nonsense expression that immediately inspired confidence. I'm the doctor from Liberty Clinic, she explained, stepping inside. Max thought your mother might need medical attention that won't be reported to insurance companies. You're part of Liberty Riders too. Sarah smiled thinly. I've known Max and your father for 30 years. When Max called saying Thomas Parker's wife needed help, I came immediately. Jessica led her to Eleanor's bedside. Sarah conducted a thorough examination, her movements efficient and gentle. When she finished, her expression was troubled. She's experiencing symptoms consistent with neurotoxicity, Sarah explained, opening her bag. I'd like to take blood samples for testing. I also have alternative medication that should help counteract some of the effects of Neurosil. As she worked, Sarah explained more about the Liberty Riders and their mission. What had begun as a support group for veterans had evolved into an advocacy organization that investigated corporate wrongdoing against military personnel. Your father was one of the founding members, Sarah revealed. After he discovered what Sterling was doing, the Riders expanded their focus to include corporate accountability. His death nearly destroyed the organization, especially with Max's injuries, but we rebuilt in his honor. When Sarah finished treating Eleanor, the older woman's breathing had already eased slightly. She packed her supplies with methodical precision, then handed Jessica a small vial of pills. 2 each morning with food, she instructed. They'll help neutralize some of the harmful compounds in Neurosil. I can't promise miracles, but it should slow the progression. Jessica clutched the vial like a lifeline. Thank you. Sarah's expression softened. Your father saved my husband's life in Fallujah. This is the least I can do. She paused at the door. Max told me about their plan. It's dangerous, but if anyone can pull it off, it would be Thomas Parker's daughter. After Sarah left, Jessica sat by the window watching the night deepen over the city, the vial of medicine in one hand, the secure phone in the other. The decision crystallized in her mind with surprising clarity. She would do it not just for her father or mother, but for all the soldiers who had suffered under Sterling's experiments, for all the patients being poisoned by his medications. She sent a simple message to Max. "I'm in. Tell me what to do." The response came seconds later. "Tomorrow, Liberty Hall, 0900. Jessica slept fitfully that night, her dreams filled with fragments of memory. Her father teaching her how to dress a wound, his patient voice explaining why some medicines helped and others hurt. The last time she saw him alive, promising to be home for her high school graduation. The police officers at the door the next day, their faces solemn as they delivered news that would shatter her world. She woke before dawn, checking on her mother before preparing for the day ahead. Eleanor seemed more peaceful, her breathing easier after Sarah's treatment. Jessica left detailed instructions for Mrs. Chen, the neighbor who would watch over Eleanor during her absence. The morning was crisp and clear as Jessica rode her second-hand bicycle to Liberty Hall. The city was coming alive around her, workers hurrying to offices, shops, raising their shutters for the day's business. Ordinary lives untouched by the conspiracy that had claimed her father and threatened her mother. Max was waiting outside when she arrived, his stance alert as he scanned the street for any signs of surveillance. He nodded in greeting, holding the door for her to enter. Inside, the team was already assembled around the large table, cups of coffee and open laptops before them. "Our intel suggests Jason Sterling will be at River's Edge Diner again today," Marcus began without preamble. "Apparently he's taken a special interest in you, Jessica. We need to capitalize on that." Ray pushed a folder across the table. "We've created a cover story for you that's close enough to the truth to be believable. Former nursing student caring for sick mother, working to pay medical bills. If Jason checks into your background, it will hold up." "What exactly am I supposed to do?" Jessica asked. "Build rapport," Dominic explained, demonstrating the pendant's hidden camera. "Get Jason talking about his father, the company, his own experiences. He's volatile but also vulnerable. He's been used and discarded by his father, and part of him must resent that even if he doesn't show it." Sarah, who had arrived shortly after Jessica, added her perspective. "Based on the medical records we've obtained, Jason likely suffers from mood swings, paranoia, and impulse control issues because of the experimental drugs. Approach him with compassion rather than fear or hostility. He's as much a victim as anyone." "What about Howard?" Jessica asked. "The diner could become a target if Sterling realizes what we're doing." "We've spoken with Howard," Max assured her. "He's on board. The Liberty Riders will maintain a presence at the diner, rotating different members to avoid suspicion. You'll never be truly alone with Jason." The morning progressed with further briefings and training on the surveillance equipment. By noon, Jessica felt simultaneously overwhelmed and resolute. The plan was dangerous with countless variables they couldn't control, but it was their best chance to expose Sterling's crimes. As they prepared to depart, Max pulled Jessica aside. "There's something else you should see before you go." He led her to a small room off the main hall that she hadn't noticed before. Inside, a simple memorial had been established. Photographs of veterans who had died due to Sterling's experiments lined the walls. Medical records, personal effects, and letters from family members told their stories. At the center was a larger photograph of Thomas Parker, surrounded by candles. 27 confirmed deaths, Max said softly. Hundreds more affected by lasting side effects. Your father discovered the pattern. He was going to expose everything save lives. That's who Thomas Parker was. Jessica stared at the faces, young men and women who had volunteered to serve their country only to become unwitting test subjects in a corporate scheme for profit. Her resolve hardened. Sterling will pay for this, she promised. All of it. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across River's Edge Diner as Jessica began her shift. Howard greeted her with a knowing nod, his eyes conveying both concern and determination. The pendant camera hung around her neck, disguised as a simple piece of jewelry. The weight of it, both physical and symbolic, reminded her of what was at stake. He usually comes in around 4, Howard murmured as they prepared for the afternoon rush. Same booth by the window, always asks for you now. Jessica focused on her routine, taking orders and serving customers with practiced efficiency. Each time the door opened, her heart rate increased slightly, anticipating Jason Sterling's arrival. When he finally appeared at precisely 4 o'clock, she was clearing a nearby table. Jason looked different today. Less aggressive, more composed. He wore expensive, casual clothes, a designer watch glinting on his wrist. He sat at his usual booth, eyes following Jessica as she moved through the diner. When she approached his table, he offered a smile that seemed almost genuine. "Coffee black," he said, his tone lacking the menace of their previous encounter. "And maybe a moment of your time, if you're not too busy." Jessica poured his coffee, conscious of the camera recording their interaction. "What can I help you with, Mr. Sterling?" "Jason, please." He gestured to the seat across from him. "Join me for a minute." Jessica glanced around the half-empty diner, then slid into the booth, maintaining a professional distance. "I can spare a minute." Jason stirred his coffee, absently studying her face. "I wanted to apologize for the other night. My behavior was unacceptable." The apology caught Jessica off guard. She hadn't expected remorse from the man who had burned her hand and threatened her livelihood. "Thank you for saying that. I have episodes sometimes," Jason continued, his eyes dropping to his coffee. "Medical condition. Not an excuse, just a fact." Jessica saw an opening and took it. "I understand more than most. I was studying nursing before my mother got sick." Jason's interest visibly peaked. "Nursing where?" "Chicago Memorial Program. Had to drop out when mom's MS progressed. Couldn't afford tuition and her medical care." "MS?" Jason repeated, something flashing behind his eyes. "My father's company makes medication for that." "Neurosil, right?" Jessica nodded, feigning ignorance of the connection. "That's what she takes. $5,000 a month, even with insurance." Jason winced. "That's excessive." "It's what keeps her alive," Jessica replied, allowing genuine emotion to color her words. "So I do what I have to do." A moment of silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken understanding. Then Jason reached into his pocket and withdrew a business card. "My father's holding a charity gala this weekend for veterans' medical care, ironically enough." A trace of bitterness laced his words. "I'd like you to come as my guest." Jessica accepted the card, her pulse quickening at this unexpected development. "Why me?" Jason's expression was difficult to read. "Let's just say I don't meet many genuine people in my world. It would be refreshing to have someone real to talk to." Howard approached the table, providing a natural break in the conversation. "Everything okay here?" "Perfect," Jason replied, finishing his coffee and standing. "Jessica will be joining me at the Sterling Foundation Gala this Saturday. She'll need the night off." Howard's surprise was momentary. "Of course, I'll arrange it." As Jason prepared to leave, he hesitated. "One more thing. The men from the other night, the ones who intervened. Do you know them?" Jessica kept her expression neutral. "Not really. They were just customers." Jason studied her face, searching for deception. "Be careful around them. They're not who they seem to be." With that cryptic warning, he departed, leaving Jessica to wonder if she was the hunter or the hunted in this dangerous game. That evening, the Liberty Riders gathered to review the footage from Jessica's pendant camera. The invitation to the gala represented an unexpected acceleration of their timeline, both an opportunity and a risk. "Sterling's annual charity gala is heavily secured," Ray explained, pulling up blueprints of the Sterling Tower where the event would be held. "Guest list strictly controlled background checks on all attendees. You'll be entering the Lion's Den." "But it's also our best chance to access Sterling himself," Marcus countered. "The Foundation's offices are on the same floor as the ballroom. If Jessica could slip away during the event." "It's too dangerous," Max argued. "Jessica hasn't had enough training for that kind of infiltration." "I can do it," Jessica insisted. "Jason seems to trust me, or at least he's interested enough to lower his guard. This could be our only chance." The debate continued late into the night. Strategies proposed and discarded, contingency plans developed. By midnight, they had crafted a plan that balanced opportunity with necessary caution. Jessica would attend the gala with Jason wearing the pendant camera and a discreet earpiece connected to the Liberty Riders team monitoring from a van nearby. Marcus would pose as catering staff, providing internal support. The objective was threefold: gather intelligence on Sterling's operations, search for documentation of the illegal experiments, and if possible, record Sterling himself making incriminating statements. As the meeting concluded, Sarah took Jessica aside. "I've analyzed your mother's blood work," she said, her expression grave. "The neurotoxicity is advanced. The countermeasures I provided will help, but But what she needs more specialized treatment than I can provide covertly. There's an experimental therapy that's showing promise for cases like hers, but it's only available through clinical trials. Jessica felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. How do we get her into a trial? That's the problem. Sterling Enterprises controls access to most MS trials in this region. Without their approval, the implication was clear. Eleanor's best chance depended on the very people responsible for her condition. The stakes of their mission had just risen exponentially. The next morning brought unexpected developments. Howard called Jessica early, his voice tense. Sterling's people were just here, health inspectors, claiming anonymous complaints about food safety violations. They're threatening to shut us down. Jessica relayed the news to Max, who wasn't surprised. Classic intimidation tactic. Sterling's sending a message letting us know he can hurt the people around you. We need to accelerate the timeline, Jessica decided. The gala is still 4 days away. Too long to wait if Sterling's already making moves. Max considered this, then nodded. You're right. We need to force his hand, make him react instead of acting. Ray has an idea. That afternoon, Jessica returned to work at the diner, the new plan already in motion. Local news stations had received anonymous tips about potential health code violations at Sterling Enterprises research facilities. A small protest had formed outside Sterling Tower, former patients claiming adverse effects from the company's medications. As expected, Jason appeared at the diner earlier than usual, visibly agitated. Have you seen the news? He demanded without preamble. They're attacking my father's company. Lies, all of it. Jessica maintained her cover, expressing appropriate concern. That sounds terrible. Is there anything I can do? Jason paced the small area near his booth. My father's furious. He's convinced it's corporate espionage competitors trying to tank our stock before the new drug announcement. New drug announcement, Jessica prompted, guiding him toward useful information. At the gala, Jason explained distractedly, Father's unveiling Nurasil Plus next generation MS treatment, twice as effective patent protection for another 20 years. He stopped suddenly as if realizing he'd said too much. That's confidential, by the way. Of course, Jessica assured him. I'm just sorry your family's going through this. Jason studied her, his expression softening slightly. You still coming Saturday? I could use a friendly face. Absolutely, Jessica confirmed, sensing his vulnerability. Though I don't have anything appropriate to wear to such an event. Don't worry about that, Jason said, his mood shifting toward something like enthusiasm. I'll have something delivered to you tomorrow, something worthy of my date. After Jason left, Jessica contacted Max immediately. Nurasil Plus, she reported. They're announcing it at the gala. Could be connected to the experimental compounds from the military trials. Good work, Max replied. This changes things. We need to get evidence of what's in that new drug before they can bring it to market. Sarah thinks it might be even more harmful than the original formulation. The following days passed in a blur of preparation and mounting tension. Jason's promised dress arrived, an elegant black gown from a designer boutique, accompanied by a note expressing his anticipation for Saturday. Jessica tried it on under Sarah's watchful eye, confirming that the pendant camera could be concealed within its neckline. Howard reported increasing harassment from city inspectors, clearly Sterling's doing. The Liberty Riders took turns maintaining a presence at the diner, deterring more aggressive intimidation tactics. Meanwhile, Sarah monitored Eleanor's condition, which had stabilized somewhat thanks to the alternative medication. By Saturday evening, every piece was in place. Jessica stood before her mirror, barely recognizing herself in the expensive gown and carefully applied makeup. The pendant camera was active, transmitting to the Liberty Riders' mobile command center. The earpiece, nearly invisible, would allow them to communicate throughout the evening. You don't have to do this, Max said through the earpiece, concern evident in his voice. We can find another way. Jessica touched the pendant, gently drawing strength from what it represented. My father didn't back down. Neither will I. A knock at the door announced Jason's arrival. He stood on her doorstep in a tailored tuxedo, momentarily speechless at her transformation. You look incredible, he said, finally offering his arm. The limousine waiting outside represented a world far removed from Jessica's daily reality. As they drove towards Sterling Tower, its illuminated spire dominating the Chicago skyline, she reminded herself of everyone counting on her success: her mother, the Liberty Riders, the victims memorialized on that wall, and most of all her father, whose quest for justice she now continued. Nervous? Jason asked, noticing her silence. Jessica offered a smile that concealed the storm of determination within her. Not at all. I have a feeling this is going to be a night no one will forget. As Sterling Tower grew larger through the window, Jessica steeled herself for what lay ahead. Tonight she would enter the fortress of the man responsible for her father's death and her mother's suffering. Tonight the scales would begin to balance. Tonight the truth would finally emerge from 7 years of darkness. The game had begun, and Jessica Parker was playing to win. Sterling Tower rose like a modern fortress against the Chicago night sky, its gleaming glass and steel illuminated by strategic lighting that emphasized its dominance over the surrounding structures. From the limousine window, Jessica observed how the building seemed designed to intimidate, to announce wealth and power without subtlety. A fitting headquarters for a man like Richard Sterling. The vehicle pulled up to the red-carpeted entrance, where attendants in formal attire stood ready to assist arriving guests. Jason stepped out first, straightening his tuxedo before extending his hand to help Jessica emerge. She took a steadying breath, acutely aware of the pendant camera nestled against her collarbone and the nearly invisible earpiece through which the Liberty Riders would guide her. Remember, Max's voice came through the earpiece, barely audible. Your primary objective is information gathering. No unnecessary risks. Jessica acknowledged with the subtlest of nods as she took Jason's arm. The foyer of Sterling Tower was a cathedral to corporate success with soaring ceilings, marble floors, and a massive sculpture of the company logo, a stylized phoenix rising from flames cast in polished bronze, dominating the center of the space. Security was evident, but discreet men and women in formal attire with telltale earpieces and vigilant eyes that assessed each arriving guest. Jason guided Jessica past the initial checkpoint, where an elegantly dressed woman checked their names against the guest list. Mr. Sterling, she greeted Jason with practiced warmth, and Ms. Parker, welcome to the Sterling Foundation Gala. They proceeded to the express elevators reserved for VIP guests. As they ascended to the 50th floor, Jessica caught Jason studying her reflection in the polished doors. Nervous, he asked. A little, she admitted, allowing genuine vulnerability to show. This isn't exactly my usual Saturday night. Jason's smile held a hint of something like empathy. Most of the people up there are just wealthy phonies pretending to care about charity. At least you're real. The ballroom occupied half of the 50th floor, transformed for the evening into a showcase of luxury and philanthropy. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in white linen and adorned with elaborate floral arrangements. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered spectacular views of the city below. A string quartet played classical music from a small stage, while uniformed servers circulated with the champagne and hors d'oeuvres. The foundation offices are through those doors at the north end. Marcus's voice came through Jessica's earpiece. He had successfully infiltrated the event as catering staff, his military-bearing disguise beneath the deferential posture of a server. I've identified at least a dozen security personnel. Richard Sterling is by the main bar with several executives. Jessica followed Jason through the crowd, maintaining the role of impressed date while scanning the room. She recognized many faces from Ray's briefing materials, politicians, business leaders, celebrities all orbiting around Richard Sterling like planets around a sun. Richard Sterling himself stood at the center of an admiring group, commanding attention with his imposing height and perfectly tailored tuxedo. At 60, he maintained the physique of a much younger man, his silver hair and beard immaculately groomed. Only the coldness in his steel-gray eyes betrayed the ruthlessness that had built his empire. When Richard spotted his son approaching, his expression shifted subtly. Not the warmth of a father greeting his child, but the calculated assessment of a man evaluating an asset. Jason, he acknowledged with a nod, before his gaze moved to Jessica, appraising her with clinical interest. And you must be Ms. Parker. Jessica, she corrected, accepting his handshake. His grip was firm, controlling his hand unexpectedly cold. Jessica works at that diner you're so inexplicably fond of, Richard said to Jason, his tone suggesting he found the association bemusing. How refreshing to have someone from outside our usual circles. The condescension was deliberate, a reminder of social hierarchies, but Jessica maintained her composure. It's an honor to be included in such an important charitable event, she replied, especially one supporting veterans. Something flickered in Richard's eyes. surprised perhaps that she hadn't been intimidated. Indeed. Well, I must continue greeting guests. The presentation begins in 30 minutes. Jason perhaps showed Jessica the foundation display. It details our various charitable initiatives. As Richard moved away, Jessica noticed Jason's posture relax slightly. Sorry about that, he murmured. He has that effect on everyone. Jessica offered a sympathetic smile. It must be challenging living up to such expectations. You have no idea, Jason replied, a glimpse of genuine emotion breaking through his polished exterior. He guided her toward a series of display panels showcasing the Sterling Foundation's philanthropic work. Among them, Jessica noticed images of military hospitals and rehabilitation centers with Sterling Enterprises logos prominently featured. Your father seemed deeply committed to veterans' causes, she observed, steering the conversation toward useful territory. Jason's expression darkened momentarily. It's complicated. The foundation does good work, but he trailed off, then shook his head. Let's get a drink. As they approached the bar, Jessica caught sight of Marcus moving efficiently among the guests with a tray of champagne. Their eyes met briefly, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. The offices remain guarded, Marcus reported quietly through the earpiece. 2 security personnel stationed at the entrance. You'll need a diversion to access them. Jessica accepted a glass of champagne from Jason, her mind working through possibilities. This building is amazing, she said. Did you grow up coming to your father's office? Not often, Jason replied, his tone suggesting old wounds. Father preferred to keep business and family separate. Except when business became family, of course. What do you mean? Jason took a long drink, then gestured toward a quieter corner of the ballroom. Let's just say I've played my part in Sterling Enterprises' success. Not always voluntarily. This unexpected opening was exactly what Jessica needed. As they moved to a more private location near the windows, she noticed Jason's hand trembling slightly around his glass, a neurological symptom she recognized from her medical training. Jason, she said gently, the other day you mentioned having episodes. Medical condition, you called it. Is that related to your father's company? His eyes darted to hers, suddenly wary. Why would you ask that? Jessica decided to take a calculated risk. I told you I was in nursing school. I recognized symptoms. The tremors, mood fluctuations, pupil dilation. Those aren't typical of any standard condition. Jason stared out at the city lights, conflict evident in his expression. For a moment, Jessica feared she had pushed too hard too fast. Then he spoke, voice barely audible. Project Phoenix, that's what he called it. Experimental performance enhancers for military application. I was 17 when the trials began. He told me I was helping my country. Jessica felt a chill despite the warmth of the ballroom. He tested drugs on his own son, on me and dozens of others, Marines mostly, young healthy specimens he called us. Jason's bitterness was palpable. The effects weren't what he promised. Some died, others like me ended up with permanent damage. Central nervous system, cognitive function, impulse control. That's criminal, Jessica whispered, genuine horror in her voice. Jason laughed without humor. Technically, yes, but who's going to prosecute Richard Sterling? He owns half the judges in the state and has dirt on the other half. There must be records, Jessica prompted. Evidence of what happened. There is, Jason confirmed, lowering his voice further. Father keeps everything. Digital records are vulnerable, he says, so he maintains physical documentation of sensitive matters. A dedicated safe in his private office within the foundation suite. Perfect timing, came Ray's voice through Jessica's earpiece. The presentation is about to begin. Everyone will be focused on the stage. As if on cue, the lights dimmed slightly and a spotlight illuminated the podium at the far end of the ballroom. Richard Sterling approached to enthusiastic applause, his presence commanding immediate attention. This is our chance, Jessica said to Jason, making a split-second decision. Show me. Show you what? The evidence. The files on Project Phoenix. She held his gaze steadily. You didn't invite me here just for company, Jason. You want someone to know the truth. Conflict played across his features, fear battling with long-suppressed rage. If he catches us, he's giving a 20-minute presentation, Jessica said. Everyone's watching him, not us. Jason hesitated, then nodded once sharply. Follow me. Act like we're just exploring. They moved casually toward the north doors, Jessica looping her arm through Jason's, as if they were simply a couple seeking privacy. Marcus intercepted them briefly, offering champagne as cover while murmuring, "Security keypad code is 7429. Ray hacked their system. The Foundation offices were dimly lit. After hours, the reception area deserted. Jason led Jessica past workstations toward a heavy wooden door at the end of the corridor. "Father's private office," he explained, approaching the keypad. His hand hovered over the numbers, uncertainty returning. "Jason," Jessica said softly, "how many others are suffering like you? How many families have lost loved ones because of these experiments?" Something hardened in his expression, resolution replacing doubt. He punched in the code and the lock disengaged with a soft click. Richard Sterling's private office reflected the man himself, imposing, meticulous and cold. Dark wood paneling, leather furniture, and carefully selected art pieces created an atmosphere of old-world power. A large desk dominated one wall, multiple monitors displaying stock tickers and news feeds even in the owner's absence. "The safe is behind that painting," Jason indicated a large abstract canvas. "But I don't know the combination." "Try his birthday," Max suggested through Jessica's earpiece. "Narcissists often use personal dates." "When's your father's birthday?" Jessica asked. "October 12, 1965. She moved to the painting, sliding it aside to reveal a modern wall safe with a digital keypad. She entered 10-12-65, but the safe remained locked. "Try the date Project Phoenix started," Ray suggested. "When did the experiments begin?" Jason, March 7, 2016. Jessica entered 03-07-16. The safe beeped in rejection. "Wait," Jason said suddenly. "Try July 4th, 1976. Independence Day, the year he founded Sterling Enterprises. He calls it his real birthday." Jessica entered 07-04-76, and the safe emitted a soft tone of acceptance before the door swung open. Inside were several folders, a portable hard drive, and a leather-bound journal. Jason reached for a thick manila folder labeled Phoenix Primary Trial Subjects. "This is it," he said, his voice tight. "Complete documentation of the initial trials. Names, dosages, results, fatalities." Jessica quickly photographed the contents with her pendant camera while Jason continued searching through the safe. "My God," he whispered, pulling out another folder. "These are financials. He's been laundering research funds through the Foundation, using charity money to fund illegal experiments." As they documented the evidence, Marcus's urgent voice came through Jessica's earpiece. "Presentation ending early. Sterling's heading back this way with security. Get out now." Jessica grabbed Jason's arm. "We need to go. Your father's coming." They hastily returned the documents to the safe, closed it, and replaced the painting. As they hurried toward the office door, Jason suddenly stopped. "One more thing," he said, turning to Richard's desk and unlocking a drawer with a key from his pocket. He withdrew a small vial of clear liquid. "Nurasil Plus, the new formula. He gave me a sample to demonstrate my commitment to the company." His expression was grim. "Take it. Have it analyzed." Jessica pocketed the vial as they slipped out of the office. They had barely reached the reception area when voices approached from the corridor. "Quick," Jason whispered, pulling her behind a large decorative screen. "There's a service elevator at the back. We can—" The main door opened and Richard Sterling's voice filled the space. "I want the announcement documents ready for distribution immediately after my speech. And make sure the promotional materials emphasize the breakthrough nature of Nurasil Plus." Another voice responded, deferential but concerned. "Sir, about the protesters." "Handle it," Richard cut him off sharply. "I don't care how. This launch cannot be compromised." Jessica and Jason remained frozen behind the screen, barely breathing. Through a narrow gap, Jessica could see Richard standing at the reception desk, his back to their hiding place. "And my son," Richard continued, "where is he?" "Last seen heading this way with his guests, sir." Richard made a sound of irritation. "Find him. Keep him away from the podium during the announcement. His condition has been unstable lately." The security officer hesitated. "Sir, about Ms. Parker. Our background check revealed some concerning connections." Jessica felt Jason tense beside her. "What connections?" Richard demanded. "Her father was Thomas Parker, the military medic who died in that car accident 7 years ago. And she's been seen with Maxwell, Donovan, and the Liberty Riders." Richard's posture stiffened. "Find them. Both of them." Now. As Richard and his security team moved deeper into the office suite, Jason turned to Jessica, betrayal etching itself across his features. Thomas Parker, he whispered. The whistleblower. That's why you're here. Jason Shoss. Was any of it real? Or was I just a means to get to my father? Jessica made a split-second decision. Your father killed mine, she said quietly. When he discovered Project Phoenix, the car accident was staged. Jason stared at her, shock giving way to a complex mixture of emotions. And you're what undercover working with those bikers to bring him down. Yes, Jessica admitted, but that doesn't mean I was faking everything. What your father did to those soldiers, to you, to my family, it needs to stop. For a terrible moment, Jessica thought Jason would call out to security. Then something shifted in his expression. The service elevator, he said finally. This way. They moved silently through the reception area to a concealed door that led to a utilitarian corridor. The service elevator waited at the end, its plain metal doors a stark contrast to the luxury they'd left behind. Max, Jessica whispered into her microphone. We've been compromised. Sterling knows who I am. We're heading down the service elevator. Understood, came their immediate response. Change of plans. Marcus is clearing our exit route. Ray is bringing the van to the loading dock. Be ready for extraction. The elevator descended swiftly to the basement level opening onto a concrete service area where delivery trucks received access to the building. Jason led Jessica through a maze of corridors, past surprise maintenance workers and kitchen staff moving supplies for the gala. Why are you helping me? Jessica asked as they hurried toward the loading bay. Jason's expression was complicated pain mingling with resolve. Because I've been complicit for too long. Because those men deserve better. Because your father tried to do the right thing, and mine had him killed for it. They reached the loading dock just as a Sterling Enterprises delivery van pulled up, Ray at the wheel wearing a company uniform. The side door slid open to reveal Marcus, similarly disguised. Get in, he ordered. We've got maybe 2 minutes before they lock down the building. Jessica turned to Jason. Come with us. Testify about what your father did. He shook his head. I can't, not yet. But I can do something else. From his pocket, he withdrew a small flash drive. Security access codes, personnel files, financial records. Everything they'll need to prove the Phoenix connection to Nurasil. Everything they'll need to bring him down. Jessica took the drive, their hands touching briefly. He'll know it was you. Maybe it's time I stopped being afraid of him, Jason replied, a new steadiness in his voice. Go, I'll create a diversion. Tell them you overpowered me and escaped alone. As Jessica climbed into the van, Jason called after her. The vial Nurasil Plus, have it tested immediately. If it's what I think it is, your mother's in danger. The van door closed as security alarms began blaring throughout the building. Ray accelerated up the ramp and into the Chicago night, weaving through traffic with practiced skill. Did you get it? Max asked through the communication system. Jessica held up the vial and flash drive. Evidence of Project Phoenix financial records showing foundation funds misused and a sample of Nurasil Plus for testing. And Jason Sterling. He stayed behind, gave us the evidence voluntarily. Max was silent for a moment. Brave kid. Let's hope he survives his father's reaction. They switched vehicles 3 times before reaching Liberty Hall, ensuring they weren't followed. The entire team assembled in the operations room where Sarah immediately took the Nurasil sample for analysis. How's my mother? Jessica asked, the adrenaline of the mission giving way to concern. Stable, Sarah replied. Mrs. Chen called earlier to report she's resting comfortably. I doubled her protective detail just in case. Max spread the flash drive contents across multiple screens, his expression growing grimmer with each new document. This is worse than we thought. Sterling didn't just experiment on a few dozen soldiers. There were hundreds across multiple military bases. And the Foundation connection, they've been funneling millions in charitable donations to fund these trials. Ray examined the financial records. There's enough here to trigger investigations by the FDA, SEC, and Department of Defense. But Sterling's connections run deep. He could still wriggle out of criminal charges. Not if we have testimony from the victims, Jessica pointed out. Jason can't be the only survivor willing to come forward once they know they're not alone. The strategy session continued into the early morning, plans forming and reforming as they assessed the evidence. By dawn, they had outlined their next steps, Sarah would analyze the Neurosil Plus sample. Ray would prepare the evidence for submission to authorities. Marcus would contact trustworthy officials within the FBI and DOJ, and Max would reach out to surviving victims of Project Phoenix. Jessica's role would be perhaps the most dangerous, returning to her normal routine at River's Edge Diner, maintaining the appearance that their operation had failed, while serving as bait to draw out Sterling's inevitable response. "I don't like it," Max objected. "Sterling will come after you directly now. He knows you're Thomas's daughter, knows you're working with us." "Exactly," Jessica countered. "He'll be focused on me, not on what we're doing with the evidence. We need time to build the case properly, to get all our ducks in a row before he can start destroying evidence or silencing witnesses." Reluctantly, the team agreed. Jessica returned to her apartment as the city awakened to Sunday morning. Eleanor was still asleep, her breathing steady, her color improved from the alternative treatments Sarah had provided. Jessica checked her vitals, adjusted her blankets, and settled into the chair beside her bed, allowing herself a moment of quiet reflection. The pendant camera and earpiece sat on the small table beside her, innocuous objects that had changed everything. Through them, she had glimpsed the world that had taken her father from her, the corporate machinery that valued profit over human life. And through them, she had found a path to justice that had seemed impossible just days ago. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "They're watching your apartment. Be careful, Jay," Jason warning her despite the risks to himself. Jessica felt a complex mixture of gratitude and concern for him, caught between loyalty to his father and the moral awakening he seemed to be experiencing. She had barely processed the warning when Sarah called, her voice tense. "The Neurosil Plus sample, I've completed preliminary analysis." "Jessica, it's not a treatment. It's poison, designed to accelerate neurological deterioration while appearing to manage symptoms. Anyone taking it would experience catastrophic decline within weeks." What a cold fear gripped at Jessica's heart. "And the current Neurosil? Similar but slower acting. The Plus version is more potent, more targeted. If your mother had switched to this..." "When is Sterling announcing it?" "Tomorrow morning, press conference at 9. Jessica's mind raced. How many MS patients would be affected? Thousands nationwide, tens of thousands globally. It would be a death sentence disguised as a breakthrough. The enormity of Sterling's crime expanded before her. Not just soldiers in secret trials, not just her father's murder, but a calculated plan to profit from the suffering and death of thousands of vulnerable patients. "We need to stop the announcement," Jessica decided. "How close are we to having everything ready for the authorities?" "Ray's compiling the final documentation. Marcus has a contact at the FBI ready to receive it. But legal processes take time, Jessica. Even with everything we have, it could be days or weeks before they move against Sterling." "We don't have weeks. We don't even have days." Jessica stood, decision made. "Tell Max I need the team assembled at Liberty Hall in 1 hour. We're changing the plan." The meeting that followed was intense, strategies proposed and discarded as they faced the grim reality of their timeline. Sterling's press conference represented a point of no return. Once Neurosil Plus was announced, doctors would begin prescribing it, patients would begin taking it, and people would begin dying at an accelerated rate. "We need to go public," Jessica argued. "Take what we have directly to the media, create enough noise that the authorities have to act immediately." "Too risky," Ray countered. "Sterling owns half the media outlets in Chicago. The others won't run a story this explosive without independent verification, which takes time we don't have." "What about a direct confrontation?" Marcus suggested. "Disrupt the press conference itself, present the evidence in front of the cameras." Max shook his head. "Security would shut it down before we got a word out. Sterling would spin it as a publicity stunt by competitors." The debate continued until Jessica's phone buzzed again. Another message from Jason. "Father moving up timeline. Announcement tonight at private media dinner. Suite 900 Palmer House Hotel, 8 p.m. "He's accelerating," Jessica said, showing them the message. "We have less than 12 hours. Sarah returned from the lab, her expression grim. "There's something else you need to see." She pulled up images on her tablet. These are MRI comparisons of patients on the current Neurosil versus the new formula. The neurological damage is catastrophic and irreversible. Even if patients stop taking it after symptoms appear, the damage continues. Jessica stared at the images, each representing a human life, that Sterling considered expendable in pursuit of profit. Her determination hardened into something cold and uncompromising. "I have an idea," she said finally, "but it's dangerous and I'll need everyone's help." The Palmer House Hotel was one of Chicago's grand old establishments, its lobby an ornate throwback to a more elegant era. By 7:30 p.m., the space buzzed with activity as journalists, executives, and medical professionals arrived for Sterling's private dinner and announcement. In a service corridor near the kitchen, Jessica adjusted her catering uniform, her hair tucked beneath a cap, her face subtly altered by Sarah's expert makeup application. The pendant camera was once again in place, recording everything. "Remember," Max's voice came through her earpiece. "Timing is everything. Wait for Jason's signal before making your move." Jessica nodded, though Max couldn't see her. Around her, other members of Liberty Riders moved with quiet efficiency, similarly disguised as hotel staff. They had one chance to get this right to prevent a pharmaceutical disaster that would claim countless lives. The media dinner was being held in the hotel's grand ballroom, transformed for the evening into an intimate space for 60 select guests. Richard Sterling had spared no expense ensuring that the journalists and opinion makers who would announce his breakthrough to the world were thoroughly wined and dined before receiving the news. Jessica moved through the service entrance with a tray of appetizers, scanning the room. Sterling stood near the head table, greeting arrivals with practiced charm. Jason was nowhere to be seen. "Target is at your 2 o'clock, Marcus murmured through the earpiece. He was positioned as security personnel, his military bearing lending authenticity to the role. No sign of Jason yet. Jessica circulated with her tray, keeping her head down as she approached Sterling's vicinity. Fragments of conversation reached her: excitement about the announcement, speculation about stock price jumps, discussion of marketing strategies. Not one mention of patient welfare or medical ethics. At 7:45, Jason finally appeared, looking pale but composed in an expensive suit. He approached his father, exchanging brief words before moving to the bar. As he passed Jessica, he made the briefest eye contact, their signal that everything was proceeding as planned. "Ladies and gentlemen," a Sterling Enterprises executive called for attention. "Please take your seats. Dinner will be served shortly, followed by our special announcement." The guests moved to their assigned tables, Jessica retreating to the kitchen as the first course was prepared. Sarah was there, disguised as a sous chef, her hands steady as she worked. "Ready?" she asked quietly. Jessica nodded. "Everything's in place. Marcus has secured the AV system. Ray has the evidence package ready to broadcast, and the real FBI agents are standing by." At precisely 8 p.m., Richard Sterling approached the podium, the room falling silent in anticipation. His confidence was absolute, his smile triumphant as he surveyed the influential gathering. Distinguished guests, trusted colleagues. He began, his voice projecting authority and benevolence in equal measure. "Tonight marks a historic moment in medical science. For years, Sterling Enterprises has led the fight against multiple sclerosis through our groundbreaking treatment, Neurosil. Today, I am proud to announce its successor, Neurosil Plus, a revolutionary advancement that will transform the lives of MS patients worldwide." As Sterling continued his carefully crafted speech, Jason moved casually to the AV control station at the side of the room, exchanging a few words with the technician before the man nodded and stepped away for a moment. "Now," came Jason's voice through Jessica's earpiece. She moved swiftly through the kitchen doors, no longer carrying appetizers but a small remote control. As she approached the center of the room, she pressed the button, and the large screens behind Sterling suddenly changed from the Sterling Enterprises logo to medical images, the devastating MRI comparisons Sarah had discovered. "What is the meaning of this?" Sterling demanded, turning to see his presentation hijacked. Jessica removed her server's cap, revealing her identity as she stepped forward. "The meaning, Mr. Sterling, is that your miracle drug is actually a death sentence." The room erupted in confused murmurs as Jessica continued, her voice carrying clearly through the suddenly active microphones. "Neurosil Plus doesn't treat MS, it accelerates it. Your own research proves it. Just as your original Neurosil was designed not to help patients, but to create lifelong customers dependent on increasingly higher doses." Sterling's face contorted with rage. "Security! Remove this woman immediately." But the security personnel who stepped forward were not Sterling's men. They were FBI agents who had been waiting for this moment, led by a contact Marcus had cultivated within the Bureau. "Richard Sterling, the lead agent announced. "You are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, illegal human experimentation, and the murder of Thomas Parker." As Sterling was read his rights, the screens changed again, now displaying documentation from Project Phoenix financial records showing the misuse of foundation funds and testimonial from surviving test subjects that the Liberty Riders had gathered over the years. "This is absurd," Sterling blustered, looking to his executives for support. "This is corporate espionage, a smear campaign by our competitors." "It's the truth," came a new voice. Jason stepped forward, addressing the stunned journalist directly. "Every word is true. I know because I was one of his test subjects. My own father used me as a laboratory rat, along with dozens of American soldiers." The room fell silent as Jason continued his testimony, devastating in its simple honesty. He detailed the experiments, the cover-ups, the deaths that had been disguised as training accidents or suicides. He explained how Sterling had orchestrated Thomas Parker's murder when the medic discovered the truth, and how the company had developed Neurosil specifically to create pharmaceutical dependency rather than healing. As Jason spoke, FBI agents moved throughout the room, serving warrants and securing evidence. The journalists present realized they were witnessing a story far bigger than a new drug announcement. They were seeing the downfall of one of America's most powerful corporate titans. Richard Sterling, handcuffed and still protesting his innocence, fixed Jessica with a gaze of pure hatred. "You have no idea what you've done," he hissed as agents led him past her. "This isn't over." "For you, it is," Jessica replied quietly. "For my father, for the soldiers you sacrificed, and for my mother and all the others you were willing to kill for profit, justice is just beginning." The aftermath unfolded rapidly. Within hours, Sterling Enterprises stock was in freefall as the story broke across all media platforms. Federal agents raided Sterling Tower, securing additional evidence before it could be destroyed. Medical authorities issued emergency warnings about Neurosil, initiating an immediate investigation into its effects. At Liberty Hall, the team monitored the developments with grim satisfaction. Their years of work had culminated in this moment of justice, though the cost had been high. "What happens now?" Jessica asked, watching news footage of Richard Sterling being led into federal court for his arraignment. "Now the legal system takes over," Max explained. "With Jason's testimony and the evidence we've provided, Sterling will likely spend the rest of his life in prison. Sterling Enterprises will face massive lawsuits, regulatory penalties, and possible dissolution." "And my mother, the other patients," Sarah offered a cautious smile. "The FDA has fast-tracked approval for a genuine MS treatment that was being suppressed by Sterling's patents and influence. It won't reverse damage already done, but it should prevent further deterioration." 6 months later, River's Edge Diner was busier than ever, its newfound fame, as the place where the Sterling conspiracy was uncovered, drawing curious patrons from across the city. Howard had expanded the menu and hired additional staff, including several veterans referred by the Liberty Riders. Jessica, dressed in a white coat rather than a waitress uniform, entered through the front door. Medical school ID hung from her neck. She had returned to her studies, supported by a special scholarship established for families of military personnel affected by Project Phoenix. "Dr. Parker in the house?" Howard called out warmly as she approached the counter. "Your usual table's waiting." Jessica smiled, taking her seat at the booth by the window. Her mother sat across from her, still in a wheelchair, but significantly improved under the new treatment protocols. Eleanor's hands were steady enough now to hold her coffee cup without assistance, a small victory they celebrated daily. "How were classes today?" Eleanor asked. "Challenging," Jessica admitted. "But good. Professor Williams says my practical experience gives me an edge." Their conversation was interrupted by the distinctive rumble of motorcycles pulling into the parking lot. Max led the procession, his scarred face breaking into a rare smile as he spotted Jessica through the window. Behind him rode the core members of Liberty Riders, now expanded to chapters in several states. Their mission evolved to include advocacy for pharmaceutical accountability and veterans' health care reform. As they entered, Howard called out greetings, the other patrons nodding respectfully. The Riders were local heroes now, their story having inspired similar groups across the country to stand up against corporate malfeasance. Max settled into the booth beside Eleanor, his manner gentler than it had been 6 months ago. The successful mission had changed him too, softening some of the harder edges worn by years of unresolved guilt. The final sentencing was today, he reported. Richard Sterling got life without parole for Thomas's murder, plus additional sentences for the other deaths and crimes. The judge made a point of mentioning Thomas by name, acknowledged his attempt to expose the truth. Jessica felt a complex wave of emotions, satisfaction, grief, and a strange sense of completion. And Jason, an immunity deal went through, Max confirmed. In exchange for his testimony, he won't face charges. He's established a foundation for the victims using his inheritance, doing good work. Their conversation turned to future plans. The Liberty Clinic had expanded now, offering specialized care for veterans and MS patients alike. The evidence they had uncovered had triggered investigations into other pharmaceutical companies with similar practices, creating a movement for reform that reached all the way to Congress. As evening fell and the diner's neon sign cast its glow across the table, Jessica looked at the unlikely family she had found: Max and the writer's Howard, her mother, even Sarah, who would join them later. From tragedy had come purpose, from loss had come connection. Outside, Chicago continued its eternal rhythm. People going about their lives unaware of the battles fought on their behalf by ordinary individuals who refused to accept injustice. Jessica thought of her father, whose courage had started this journey 7 years ago. She hoped he would be proud of how it had ended. To Thomas, Max said quietly, raising his coffee cup, and to the truth that wouldn't stay buried. They touched cups in silent tribute, united by shared struggle and hard-won victory. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fights for justice in a world where the powerful often preyed upon the vulnerable. But tonight, in this moment of peace, they had earned their rest. And somewhere beyond the neon-lit windows and the infinite tapestry of memory and legacy, Thomas Parker's spirit seemed to stand guard over his daughter and the comrades who had finally completed his mission. Justice, long delayed, but ultimately undefeated, had prevailed.